Sounds good. So we'll get started and people will probably join in between. But welcome to the Wildlife Indiana Flight Initiative program, hosted by the Indiana Audubon Society and other collaborators as well, which they'll go through in a minute. My name is Sam Moore, and I'm the outreach coordinator with Indiana Audubon. And right now we are live on Zoom, and we're also on Facebook Live. You can definitely interact on Facebook Live by posting any comments or questions right on the video. We might wait till questions for the end, but we'll get to them as soon as we can. Just know that if you're on Facebook Live, there's about a 20-second delay. So if it's something really pressing, I'll try to get to it as soon as possible. But otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to the presenters of this program. I think Amy Wilms is going to take over.
Yeah, so I do welcome everyone to our initiative, and hope that in the end you'll all join. And by the time we get done, you'll want to put up a MOTUS tower. So we're trying to build an infrastructure within Indiana, and that would be excellent to do. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and go through some of the speakers. We want to tell you just a little bit about ourselves. And Julia, I think you're going to start.
Sure. So my name is Julia Wilson. I'm a biologist in Bloomington, Indiana, and a board member of the Sassafras Audubon Society, and really love to watch birds.
And leads a mean bird walk. She does a great bird walk.
Well, thank you.
Hi, I'm Allison Gillette. You can call me Allie as well. And I'm the Indiana DNR state ornithologist. And I'm specifically really interested in MOTUS. My whole responsibility is to conserve birds, and I love birds.
And my name is Nancy Lightfoot. Am I next? I think so. I'm the president of Sassafras Audubon Society. I work as an editor at IU Press, but I love birds. Birds are my passion, and conservation is my passion. And our whole board has been very excited about the possibility of building a MOTUS fence across Indiana and getting a better sense of the population declines in our migratory species. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Nancy. And I am Amy Wilms. I'm the president of the Indiana Audubon Society. I am also a co-manager out at the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary, where we about 2 years ago, put up our first MOTUS station here at the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary. And I'm excited to share some of the data that we're getting from that this afternoon. And I just welcome everyone and hope that you have questions and want to help build our infrastructure. So I think we're going to get started with Julia.
Sure. Yeah, and I just want to echo that thanks. I know everyone's probably a little bit zoomed out, being coronavirus time, but so we really appreciate everyone joining. And so I'll just go ahead and touch a little bit on MOTUS as a technology. So MOTUS is Latin, and it means movement or motion, and it's a wildlife tracking system that's really emerging as an important conservation and ecological research tool. And MOTUS stations passively detect radio-tagged birds and bats that pass near them out to a 16-kilometer line of sight radius. So tagged animals, birds, bats, sometimes insects, may have been outfitted as part of a graduate research study, for instance, or by agencies like the IDNR, who want to track endangered species movement and get a better sense for how species may be using habitats within our state and the US. And really, MOTUS stations are providing invaluable data relating to avian migration timing and routes, which is, of course, especially of interest to our more cryptic species like marsh birds and threatened and endangered species. And Modus is, as I mentioned, a passive detector station. So it is not necessarily a new technology, but it is detecting ultra high frequency and very high frequency signals from radio tagged birds and bats. And so the stations consist of an array of antennae in different orientations mounted on top of a tower, which often are old TV towers or just any kind of small tower. And it's connected at the base to a data logging computer. And typically these are around 40 feet in height or really just above that tree level, because as I mentioned, the site, it has a line of sight detection. So if you can minimize trees and geographic features on the landscape, you'll get a larger detection zone. So the antenna array can be 2 antenna that create just like a bidirectional fence, but that doesn't really provide as much directionality and information as a 4 antenna array, where often they're put in 4 cardinal directions, as you can see on this photo. And the radio tags that I mentioned on the birds and bats can last from a few weeks to up to the life of the bird. So you can really get a sense of how much data is possible to collect the more stations you have on the landscape. And anytime a tagged bird or bat flies or stops over in proximity to the towers, the timestamp, direction, and unique animal ID is recorded. And so that's what, some of you wildlife biologists might be familiar with radio telemetry studies, and this is very similar to that. It just passively is collecting data in an automated fashion with that data logging computer, which just has a lot of throughput and high potential for a lot of data collection. So like I said, the more MOTUS stations are on the landscape, the clearer the picture becomes of where and when birds are migrating. And so presently there's hundreds of towers across the eastern United States, and especially in Ontario. We have a large concentration there, and they're collecting unprecedented levels of migration data. And many bird migrants follow the eastern shoreline down to South America, and there's a growing array of MOTUS stations down there as well. So we're getting a lot more fine scale data the more stations that go up. However, there's an obvious lack of stations in the Midwest here in Indiana. So that presents a knowledge gap. And our goal as wildlife biologists and conservationists is to close that gap and create a MOTUS fence so that tagged birds that migrate through the area can be recorded and we can understand more about their movements and migratory behavior. And we're hoping to get some grant funding that can be used to support this goal and help with installation costs. And if grant money is received, then we would want to distribute it to interested parties such as yourself. Another really cool thing about MOTUS is its web functionality. So this screenshot was taken directly from modus.org, and these are all of the live MOTUS stations across the eastern United States. So it's really easy to visually view data on the web. So I inserted a little video here from modus.org, and this is actually a bat study in Ontario that just demonstrates the level of data and movement data you can collect when you have a robust array of MOTUS stations. And again, anyone can explore these data sets on modus.org. They're open source, so I encourage you to do that and just kind of play around. I attached another example here of common nighthawks. So the gray circles are stations that are going up live, and the red lines are the nighthawks moving down to Panama and South America. And so you can see the detections are really increasing and the data is becoming more robust as more stations go up on the landscape. And again, note the lack of stations in the Midwest, and there's a real potential to increase the information we get here. So with that, I will pass it over to Allison.
Thank you, Julia. So I will be specifically talking about the goals that we have in Indiana. So ultimately, our goal is to enhance the understanding of how birds and other migratory wildlife like bats, especially those that we are considering as rare and state endangered, are moving in and out of Indiana to more precisely target bird and other wildlife conservation efforts. So this not only means that we're trying to understand where they're going, but also at what time they are found, whether it be spring or fall, because we have learned that some species have different migratory pathways depending on the season. As a result, we support expanding the MOTUS network because it will help us better identify major migratory pathways and stopover sites so we can better manage them or protect these areas for these wildlife. And as a result, we can do this by expanding the MOTUS network. Julia spoke very eloquently about how expanding the network will better improve our understanding of where these animals are going, because it'll give us finer scale data on specifically what pathways they're taking. So by expanding the MOTUS network, we will increase and maximize the likelihood of detecting tagged birds. And in Indiana, we really need to do that by adding more towers. So the Midwest Migration Network, as you can see their little emblem on the slide, they're a partnership that supports the coordinated monitoring of bird migration in the Midwest. They're also trying to incorporate hopefully other wildlife in the future, but for now they're focused on birds. And they've outlined a long-term strategic plan for the placement of MOTUS receivers, or MOTUS towers as we call them, in these fences or these contiguous lines of receivers where the detection of tagged birds is highly likely across the Midwest. So as you can see these fences are really just largely latitudinal configurations, and they are along waterways that we would consider as migratory corridors that may host high concentrations of migratory wildlife. So as you can see, you see the east to west fences, as well as the MOTUS towers that are going around, for example, like Lake Michigan. And this is what I like to term as the deluxe version of our plan, what our network would ideally look like. So this is what we're aiming for. Julia, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. However, our current situation, as of last night while I was putting this, this presentation together, is that we have 8 towers in Indiana. And you can see there are 4 towers that are up in the northeast. Those are hosted by Fort Wayne's Children's Zoo. And when you go from west to east, they have them specifically located at, for example, the Wildwood Acres Land Trust, a nature preserve at their zoo, and along the Maumee River in Blue Cast Springs. So they are trying to strategically plan out where these towers should be placed. So they're putting them in more like natural areas. And then you have in central Indiana, the specific point that is all alone, that's Indiana Audubon Society's Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary. They are alone, but strong in their efforts, I'd say. And then we have South Central Indiana, where we have Indiana University's Environmental Resilience Institute, supporting 3 towers. And they are specifically in the Ameriflex station is the one that's furthest to the north in that green area, which is mainly state forests. And then they have one at Kent Farm, which is the research station in TC Steele near Bloomington along State Road 46. So there are only really 3 organizations that are supporting towers right now. And right now they're not quite capable of forming the fence lines that we're aiming for in that deluxe version of Indiana's network. Next slide, please. So why is this really? And really the reason is that reality only allows us to place towers in certain locations. We only have the ability to place them on areas that are approved by the landowners. So likely your partners, your partner organizations, or the people you already know. Go back one slide. Thank you. You're also looking for locations that have low maintenance costs, meaning they're easily accessible. You don't have to drive far distances to get to them. They have power that's readily available, so you don't have to constantly replace batteries or install a solar system that might be a little bit more expensive. And it would be most ideal to have a location that has an internet connection, so that you don't have to visit the tower regularly to download the data from the tower when they sense the tags. And another factor that you have to consider when placing a tower is that it should have a clear line of sight. And because we don't live in a perfect world with unlimited resources and cooperation, I therefore propose instead an economy version, which would be a compromise between the deluxe version and reality, where I like to call them loose fences. And this would be a looser array of towers that go in a relatively east to west direction across the region. Like you see on the right map, you see there's a loose fence up in the north and then a loose fence down in the south that is kind of going more along the Ohio River. Next slide, please. So there is good news, however, even though we have only 8 towers in Indiana, supported by 3 organizations, we are really kind of on the brink of a more developed network that will begin to form these 2 loose fences. So for example, this year, the Indiana DNR partnered with the Missouri Department of Conservation and submitted a grant proposal called Broadening the Modus Wildlife Tracking Network in the Midwest and the Neotropics, so that we could get federal money to expand the Modus network through 6 states in the Midwest, specifically Indiana, Missouri, Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois, and also in 3 countries, which are Costa Rica, Yucatan in Mexico, and Colombia. So in Indiana, this grant will help us establish 7 new towers. So these towers they've been proposed. The money hasn't been funded yet because mainly federal grants have been slowed down by COVID, as such is the story with many things. But we are hoping and anticipating that we will get these towers. So it will establish 7 new towers at state fish and wildlife areas in northern and southern Indiana to help examine how these properties specifically support migratory wildlife, especially birds. And the reason why I chose them not only is because I want to see how they support migratory wildlife, but I also assume that they are capable of having high concentrations of these wildlife because they have the habitat to support them. So I'm kind of trying to place these towers in locations that would have high traffic, pretty much, of birds and other wildlife. So the installation of these 7 towers will begin to form loose east to west fences, and I show them by the stars with the white outlines on the map. And these towers are supposedly, the plan is to incorporate cellular tracking technology sensor stations that will also pick up not only the nano tags that are for the Modus towers, but also life tags and power tags. And the antennas will be mounted to state buildings. They won't be on taller towers, but they will be mounted to state buildings to at least give them a little bit more elevation. And that will allow them to have power and internet so that the detections can be downloaded into the website in real time, the Modus website. Also, there are a few towers that I'm anticipating to be installed in the coming years. These are by nonprofit and federal agencies, and these have mainly been through just discussions over email of people's intent on putting them up. And there's one at the Mesker Park Zoo that they're hoping to put up by Carrie Ulmer, and then the Indianapolis Zoo, and the Indiana Dunes National Park. So even though it might look like, oh, no, I don't have any locations that I know of, that I don't have any partners who are located in an area that will form or help form this loose fence, that don't assume that you can't still put up a tower or help contribute to putting up a station. Just because you're not in the right location or you don't know somebody who's in the right location. You can still put up a tower by sponsoring or financially supporting a MOTUS station to add to this loose fence. If you have to strategically place a tower, but have the context near one of these ideal locations, we can actually get you connected to sponsor one. So we can connect you to the right people. So that's why we're hosting these webinars, to get you all connected. Also, if you'd like to contribute, if you really want to actually put up a tower and know of a site that's really interesting, please let us know. If they're not in the loose fence, we're still interested in certain areas too, such as like around a large lake or near a river, because we imagine they're typically major migratory pathways. And remember that putting up a station, even if it's close to another, will not duplicate efforts. As long as it's 16 kilometers away from another station, or double that rather, because of the radii, so 32 kilometers, it will be another tower in the network that will help listen for birds and other migratory wildlife. Next slide. So now, hopefully we've convinced you that it's important to put up a tower or sponsor one. And you're probably now thinking, well, it seems really significant that I should do this, but how much really does it cost? So I've put up on this table the projected cost of a receiver. So this is just a portion of the tower. Sometimes people will buy them, the specific receiving device parts, and then also buy the hardware for it as separate things. So this is the projected cost of the receiver, which is a single CTT sensor station that specifically picks up the life or power tags and MOTUS tags, which are the MOTUS nano tags. And it mainly consists of a case and all the electronic complexities that I'm not very familiar with, and I'm sure Amy Wilms can talk more on that because she built her own. So she has a really great expertise in being able to put these things together. Next slide, please. And then the overall costs to actually put up a tower so that it is capable of listening to the tagged animals is around $4,500 to $5,000. And that includes 4 UHF ultra high frequency antennae, 4 PLC antennas for picking up MOTUS nano tags and life power tags. So this gives you kind of just like an itemized list of the things that are required to make a tower. Some of these are actually, some of them are optional. So the pop-up mast and hardware, that's only if you don't have a clear line of sight and you need to elevate your tower. So that cost can be removed if you're able to instead perhaps mount it on a building or a pre-existing tower. And then the other parts here are specifically, again, for having the deluxe version of a tower, which is 4 antennae to sense one type of tag and 4 antennae to sense another type of tag. And the reason why we want 4 is to have them all in each cardinal direction. And so that is it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box. And I'll let Nancy, I think she's next.
Okay, great. I am not involved with putting up the towers. I'm not a working biologist, But I did want to talk a little bit about the importance of collaboration for this project. I think Ali's made and Julia have both made really compelling arguments for why we need to support this technology in order to protect our wildlife here in Indiana. I think that Julia has put together a really nice slide here talking about the importance of collaboration, and I think it's important to remind you that you can be part of that collaboration. We started out as a group of, I'm the president of Sassafras Audubon, and Julia is also a board member. And we started out as just a group of people who were extremely committed to conservation and science-based conservation. And we really wanted to put up a Modus tower at Goose Pond, we decided, because it's a wonderful migratory hotspot in our 8-county area. And we started reaching out to people and saying, how can we make that happen? We talked to other nonprofits. We talked to Amy Wilms, who said, oh, forget just Goose Pond. We need a whole fence. And we started thinking bigger and bigger. But we applied for a grant from Indiana Audubon. Sassafras Audubon will also be adding funding. And we're hoping to add financial support to Ali's tower at Goose Pond as that gets approved. So there are lots of ways you can contribute to Modus. I think, Ali, if you go to the Modus pages, you'll see similar information to what Ali presented. You can actually set up your own Modus tower. But we need you on every front. We need funding, we need land to put it on, we need land to access land that they're put on, we need tech people, we need volunteers. So please be thinking about how this can work for you or public lands near you. We just started talking to people and making connections, and you can do that as well. And I think you should consider all of us resources too. Our board members our board meetings are always open. Your local conservation organizations can help, and together I think we can build this Modus fence across Indiana. And build a coalition of conservationists to support the conservation challenges we find when we build the fence. So that's mainly what I had to say. And please let us know what your thoughts are and what your questions are in the chat.
Thanks, Nancy. So this is Amy Wilms, and I do want to make sure that folks understand Stu McKenzie just wanted to pipe in. He is with Modus, and he did want us to mention that one minor point of clarification is Modus tags comprise of tags manufactured by cellular tracking technologies, or CTT, life tags and power tags, and low tech nano tags, battery and solar. And you can go to the Modus website to find out more about that. And there's a link over on the chat side at the right. Thanks, Stu, for letting us, making sure that that is a great point of clarification. So what I wanted to talk about is, this is a really simple research project that I took on at the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary. And I want to show you we talk about tracking birds and trying to figure out who's doing it and how are they getting these transmitters on these birds. And as a bird bander, I wanted to take on a project and learn more about our Indiana northern saw-whet owls. And I also have another research study with wood thrush. Once I decided to put up a Modus station, I started seeing a few pings coming here and there, and thought, well, as a bird bander, why don't I go ahead and answer some questions that I have about some of the northern saw-whet owls. And being at the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary, we're pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. And I thought it would be really interesting. We're surrounded by agriculture, but we have 700 acres of forested land. in where we do our northern saw-whet owl project. And I want to show you just a little of the data that folks who do decide to put on tags, or even just want to see what kind of information can come out of a MOTUS station. I wanted to show you that. So if you just look over on the right, so we're talking about one of the birds that I banded in November of 2019. And it was banded on 11/21 of 2019. And I decided at that point in time that as part of my research project, I want to learn, do birds stay at the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary over the winter? We honestly couldn't answer that because they hunker down and they're very shy. So I was catching northern saw-whet owls for the last several years, but by putting on a tag, I could figure out, first of all, with our MOTUS system here, I could figure out presence, absence. Do those birds stay at the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary, or do they come here, get a band on, and then they disperse and they leave the sanctuary? And I want to talk about this bird number 373 because this is absolutely fascinating. So we put a band on it on 11/21, and this is all of the different MOTUS stations that this bird pinged at. So this was a very, very busy bird. And Julia, if you'll go to the next slide, I'd like to show you a little more of the map that this bird took. And it's just fascinating to me that it only stayed here for a couple of days, along with another bird that I had put a tag on, very similar to the dates. And if you'll go ahead and click on So if you look down in the bottom, kind of left-hand side of the map, you'll see that on November 21st and 22nd, that particular bird, it stayed here. So that's number 373. This was a hatch year female, and she only weighed about 88 grams. But once she left the sanctuary, we didn't see her for quite some time. But come January, we ended up seeing that she was one busy gal. So by January 9th through March 30th of 2020, you can see the circled area where she spent most of her time, going back and forth and to different locations along the way, and spent quite a bit of time there. But I think what's even more fascinating, and Julia, if you'll go ahead and click one more time about this bird, was that you sometimes think that you only get a little bit of data. And I recently logged into the MOTUS system and looked to find that this bird had spent most of the time, it ended up showing up in Canada, and then moved over and on October in October of 2020. So this bird here is pretty much the flight. Now, please remember that just because the lines are straight doesn't mean that this bird flew straight. But it took off in October, and then again on October 7th, it moved quite a distance away. October 9th, we saw it again, and this is this fall. So it was only a couple months ago that this bird showed up, and then it ended up, it was pinged at a couple of other stations, and what's exciting is that every time you go into MOTUS and onto modus.org, and you look at the information, some stations don't necessarily have an internet connection, so it might take a couple of weeks to a couple of months to get this information. So hopefully we'll actually see the birds pinging. This particular bird might ping just a little longer. Now this particular tag is a low-tech tag, and it was projected to last, anywhere between, in the upper 300 days to a little over 400 days. So the tag itself is probably pretty much met the life of the bird, maybe has another month of existence, but hopefully we'll be able to see a little more information about that. but this is exactly why we want to put more MOTUS stations within Indiana. Having that fence is critical to us learning more about these birds. Do they stay in Indiana? When are they migrating through? And we can find out a lot more information about what we have in Indiana, and learn more how to protect them and strategize with conservation. So that pretty much ends, and I do really hope that as we're going through, we do have some more time to be able to have folks ask us questions. I always tell folks, go to modus.org, click on Explore Data. You will be amazed at the amount of information that's already in this database and that you can see without being a part of a project. And you always have the opportunity to either put a station up. I have one, it's literally here. It's inside my house, is all the equipment and everything that I needed. And I hired someone to put it up on a TV tower. It's about 70 feet high, and it's been detecting birds for a couple of years. And the nice thing is you can even go to trainings and learn how to build these that are a little less expensive, but actually the cost is well worth everything the data that you'll get out of it. And so I do highly suggest find out more on that modus.org site. What I love about this MOTUS and working with Low Tech and CTT and all these other organizations is that this is a group of folks who want to collaborate and support each other. And that's exactly what we want to do in Indiana. So please become a part of our initiative. If you want to do that, please just, you can easily send me an email and we'll get you on a list, and we'll try to start coordinating more. We'll also try to connect each other to the participants here on this call to make sure that if you want to learn more or you want to learn where do I start, these are the folks. Don't hesitate to contact us, and we'll be more than happy to help. As I say, I have a little bit of experience more with the fun cubidoggles and not as much with the CTT systems, but that's what I'm willing to learn. And I also have the ability to help train within our state to be able to put tags on birds if you're a master bird bander. So that's always a possibility. So at this point, what we would like to do is open it up to questions. And if you'll just open your chat box over to the right, we'll be more than happy to answer some of your questions. And I think Sam is going to, if we had any on Facebook Live, she's going to ask some of those too for participants.
So the first question that I see in the chat is from Rick. He's asking, where can you get a recording of the presentation? I am recording this presentation and we'll be uploading it to the Indiana Audubon YouTube. It's also on our Facebook page, on the Indiana Audubon Facebook page as well, and it usually sits up there for a while. We can email you the YouTube link if you'd like as well. I don't have any questions. If you are joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to post your questions about MOTUS or the Wildlife Indiana Flight Initiative in general, and we'll get to them. There's a few questions from earlier in the chat. Rick is wondering if the tracking tags are an open source project.
Yes, if it is open source, I have the capability to build these in mass. So that's what I was wondering. Also, I have a 160-foot tower in Buda. I think Allie has been there at the Hack Tower before, and she's probably seen that tower. Also, I just pulled a 40-foot tower out, and it's ready to be painted and erected. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but now I do. I just need some antennas. Also, I have lots of coax, and I'm a ham radio operator. also I know lots of other
Okay.
ham radio operators
Oh,
with
excellent.
a lot of
That's
other
great.
towers. So we'll look into that.
We needed you on this call.
That's actually the connection. This is Amy. The connection that I made when I got started trying to put up my station was I found someone who was a ham operator and excellent people, because it really helps with someone who understands the difference between 166 and a Raspberry Pi, etc. If you're interested in building one.
Yes, I am interested, and so is Chris. His microphone's not hooked up. He's also a ham radio operator, and he has some property in Freetown. We also do a lot of internet linking between our sites. I build digital communication systems, so as a hobby. So we can shoot internet back and forth, 10, 15 miles. So we also do solar. So we'll be able to help someone if they need some input on the solar side as well.
I might be here now. Let me see. This is Chris. Can somebody hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, Chris.
Oh, great. Yeah, I found my mic and I plugged it in, so it works. So yeah, there's a couple interesting options, I think. Rick covered a couple of them with the amateur radio operator aspect and, towers and stuff like that. And they have some technical expertise, especially in these areas. Another area that I think is interesting, I'm a market farmer. And basically that means I grow vegetables and things and sell them at farmers markets. And one of the things market farms are very interested in is connecting with nature and showing to their buyers how they connect with nature. So there may be an aspect of hooking up with market farms through extension services in Purdue and some of those things and farmers markets. Now, the cost aspect might be something, but I think if there's some grant money available for it and maybe, towers and things that, sorry, my fire radio going off. Market farmers might be interested in doing some of this stuff because it could link them to nature and tracking some things. And it's a neat antenna array, especially if you're doing some agritourism things. Somebody comes on the farm, I could definitely see one of those towers with the neat antennas coming off, avoiding technical stuff. Wow, what's that? And there's a sign right there that says, this is Modus and this is what we're doing, and do a QR code so they can look at the map and some stuff like that. So just throwing in some weird ideas and alternate stuff. So there might be some other things that we can look at too as well.
I'd like to give this is Nancy Lightfoot. I'd like to give a shout out to Trevor Edmondson. Trevor, don't give up. We really wanted to get a tower at Goose Pond, and we really wanted to put up a Modus tower, and we just kept talking to people and saying, hey, if we can do this, can you do this? And you can make it happen. So good for you.
It's going to happen.
Good job.
Oh, yes. We will make
help.
sure that happens.
All right, we have a few other questions from the chat earlier on. Joni wants to know, are there any local or other permits needed to erect a 40-foot tower if someone was interested in putting one up?
I think
this is Amy, and you're a bat person, so you probably know.
I was just going to say, I think 40 feet is under the FAA threshold for needing any kind of special permitting in that regard. I believe it's 100 feet, but I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong there. But in terms of wildlife permits, I don't think anything is needed.
Does anybody happen to know who she could contact to confirm? FAA, the FAA. Check out the FAA website.
I think it's
Or even if you know of a ham radio person, I'll bet you that they would be a great connection.
190 feet.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, and if you're in an airport area, you may want to check with your local airport because it could be less.
Yeah, within 3 miles.
Great.
Okay, another question we have, speaking of where to look for things, I think someone asked earlier if they were interested in building their own tower. I think it was Allie that had some building information up, but where could they go to get some of those documents or find out more information on how the specifics of building one?
That is
This
a
is
good
Amy.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
go ahead, Amy.
the best
Amy
place,
would.
the best place is to start with the modus.org website, tootle around and look at that. And then if you do have more questions about how to build your own, don't hesitate to send me an email. This is Amy Wilms. And again, the one that I built was just on the 166 frequency, but I could get you a start. And actually, the additional antenna could be added with the CTP system. So Modus is wonderful, again, about collaborating and supporting these efforts. So don't hesitate to contact me and I'll get you in contact with some help.
Awesome, thank you. Another question, I think they're labeled the Indiana Dunes Owl Banders, but I'm pretty sure it's Brad somewhere. They, whether he's banding or not, he's wondering, do the trackers fall off after the birds die, or are they permanently attached?
So I can say from my perspective that these will stay on the life as the life of the bird. I put backpacks on the northern saw-whet owls, and the type of material that we use, it would most likely not come off of the owl. It's even hard to cut with scissors. So it's called Stretch Magic that we use. But there are if you have a smaller bird, you can use different types of materials, and Allie might be able to speak to that a little more.
Yeah, I know that there are definitely tags now that are small enough where, if it depends on the nature of your project, what specifically your objectives are, but I've seen tags being attached just to like feathers of a tail or something like that, and then they would molt them off. But really, again, it depends on the goal of your project. If you're just looking at movements within a season and molting, losing that tag is not an issue, then it won't stay on that bird for its life. But if you're going to be putting on a harness that is perhaps made out of Stretch Magic, then it will be on for the life of the bird. It also depends on the style of harness that you put on the bird. There are different harnesses where they have the ability to come off during perhaps quote unquote emergency situations. There's a loose link in the harness where it's just kind of put together by some threading, and that if there's enough weight put on the bird, for example, if it gets stuck in a tree or something like that, it can perhaps pull itself out of that harness. So things to consider are the design of the harness, how you're going to attach it, and the objectives of your study.
As the bat representative here, in case anyone's interested in that, I know those also need special permits to tag bats, but those are attached with glue. So like Allie said, those actually would fall off after a couple of weeks. So yeah, it really does just depend on your study organism and their size.
Awesome, thank you. Another question kind of related to putting the trackers on, how close do the birds or the bats have to be to the tower to get recorded?
9 to 12 miles, right?
16 kilometers? Line of sight.
10 miles, yeah, at maximum.
Awesome. I think Rick just has a question in the chat. He wants to know, what data format does the transmitter send AX25, ASCII text, or another?
Good question.
Yeah,
I'd say Stu. Do you know?
Stu, exactly.
Glad you're
Stu will
here.
know.
Stu,
In order to output the data, it does go in. Most of it is connected with R, and that's where your data goes in order to be able to manipulate it and to understand more of the research side of it. And actually, Modus has excellent materials and our book that step-by-step instructions about how to enter what you're trying to get out of the information.
Okay, very good. I'll check out the material. I was just curious on how the telemetry came in.
It's a great question. And Stu did respond in the chat, Rick. If you want to get in touch with him, he left his email about transmitter specifics, trying to do multiple things while on the Zoom. Well, we're still happy you joined us, Stu. So
It's just, I'm looking this up right now, and it says in the Modus R book, accessing data, that the data structure is stored as an SQLite file with the extension Modus.
so its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question in the chat from Chris. He said, you talked a little bit about insect tracking. He's planting a native wildflower patch for monarch butterflies. Do you know if it'll work with the monarchs? Just looking at tagging them next year.
I'm not sure if they've released a tag that's light enough for monarchs yet. Allie, do you know?
That is a good question. I'm not sure, but I am
In development, I know.
very quickly looking at the Modus Wildlife Tracking System website. If you go on modus.org, you can learn a lot more there and specifically look at all the different species that have been tagged and are being studied now.
And Stu just posted in the chat at modus.org/publications. There's a publication about monarchs, so that may be something to check out.
Great, thanks. I appreciate it.
And I Googled, and it says there are nanotransmitters. So you might want to Google yourself.
The great networking environment. It's awesome.
All right, are there any other questions, or if any of our presenters have anything to add? I don't have any other questions coming in on the Facebook Live yet, so this is a good time. If you have them, feel free, or if you guys have anything else to chime in for.
This is Amy, and what I'll do is for all the participants, I will send out a list of everyone who participated today, just in case you want to make a connection with someone. You can always, again, go to the modus.org website and look and see what kind of information that they have. And then if you have a particular interest in joining our initiative, please let us know. Everyone is welcome. And if you have a specific question about supplies or thinking about a station, don't hesitate to get a hold of me. My email is on the right-hand side of the chat, and I'll be happy to at least get you in connection with someone who can help. We do thank everyone for being here. This was fun, and we hope that it was informative, and our goal is let's get some fences up in Indiana.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much for joining us, everyone. And Amy, we can include, I will send you the link to the YouTube, but when that gets uploaded, hopefully tomorrow as well. So.
Okay, that sounds great.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming.
Take care.